In the previous video, we created a synchronous Lambda function that takes a string as input and returns a string as output. Now we will create an asynchronous Lambda function that is triggered through S3 events. In this video, we are going to create a Lambda function that can be invoked through S3 events. Then we will test the function with a dummy event, and then we will upload a file to S3 and see if our function is triggered through the createObject event. I am now on my Eclipse IDE and have opened the project that we have created in the previous videos. Now I'm going to add a new Lambda function handler to my project. I click on the little orange box and select New AWS Lambda function. Here I will create a new function handler name, S3 function handler, and I'll use as an input type the default that is already selected, S3 event, and as output type I leave it at as object. Click on Finish. And this will create some boilerplate code with a Lambda function handler that takes an S3 event as input. Let's deploy the new function. I upload the function to AWS Lambda. The region is still EU Central in Frankfurt, but I create a new Lambda function, my S3 Java function. Click on Next. And here we have to select, because now we have two Lambda function handlers and I don't want to deploy the same Lambda function as before. I want to deploy the new function handler that I've just created. So I select S3 function handler. I select an IAM role and I click on Finish to upload the code. Now the code has been uploaded and we switch over to the AWS Management Console to test our Lambda function with a dummy S3 event. I am on my Management Console now and I've selected the my S3 Java function. Now let's test it. And for testing it, I'm going to configure a test event. Here I'm going to select the S3 put event, which you find down here. So this simulates that somebody has uploaded a new object to an S3 bucket. Click on Save and Test. The Lambda function returns null, and the log output that you can see down here is the S3 event. Let's go back to the Eclipse IDE. Since the input event is not very verbose, I'm back on the Eclipse IDE. Since the input event is not very verbose, I'm back to the IDE. Let's give out some more information about our S3 event. Sample. I'm back inside my Eclipse IDE. Let's make the console output a little bit more verbose. So we'll replace the code that was here before with the following. We are going to iterate over our records, which are of the type S3 event notification record, and then we'll output some information like the event name, the event source, and the object that has triggered the event. Let's update our code. We choose the same function as before, click Next, and finish to upload the code. Our function has been updated, so we'll head back to our AWS Management Console. We are on the AWS Lambda dashboard and click on the Test button again, which uses the same dummy event from before, and here we can see the log statements like the event name, which is an object created event of type put, event source is S3, and the object key is happy face JPEG. Okay, it seems like the Lambda function can process S3 events. How about testing it with a real S3 event? Let's click on the Triggers tab and add a new trigger to our Lambda function. Here you can select a number of triggers. We want to choose a S3 trigger. And I'm going to use the S3 bucket that I have previously created. If you don't have an S3 bucket yet, create a bucket, and then we'll test our Lambda function with events in that bucket. Here you can also specify for which type of events you want to trigger your Lambda function. We'll listen for object created events. And click on Submit. Now a trigger has been created for our Lambda function. Let's go to the S3 dashboard and upload a file into our S3 bucket, and then check if in our log statements of the Lambda function we can see the metadata of the file that we have uploaded. I'm on my S3 dashboard, and now I'm going to upload a file into my bucket for which I have just created the trigger. The file has been uploaded. Let's take a look at our Lambda log. I'm back on the dashboard of my Lambda function, and I'm going to click on Monitoring and View Logs in CloudWatch. And as you can see in the logs, we have our dummy event, the happy face JPEG file, but we also have the smiling cat JPEG that I have just uploaded. As you can imagine, you can do a lot of things with a Lambda function using triggers. For example, we could process the JPEG file, could transform it into a thumbnail, store that thumbnail into another S3 bucket, and then load it on your web page to load faster As you can imagine, you could do a lot of things with this Lambda function. For example, if somebody uploads a photo, you could create a thumbnail picture and store that thumbnail in another S3 bucket, which you load on your web front end, or other things like that. In the next video, we are going to create a simple serverless Java application.